Hey, Dave Coplin here with yet another Rise of the Humans live stream, dialing into the future of work. We have spent Christmas enjoying ourselves. We have eaten, drunk, and be merry. We may still be drinking and be merry. It's too hard to tell. It's very early, early somewhere in the world. I don't know. I hope you've had a great Christmas. We have been reflecting a lot on 2020. Today is a time for prediction. We're in that sort of interesting space between Christmas and New Year where, I don't know if you're like me, but I like to spend a lot of time sitting back and reflecting on what we might do and the things that we've done and the places we might go. And especially when it comes to 2021 and we start to think about the opportunity of what lies in front of us. It is a world that is filled with optimism in the sense that vaccine is a world that is still chaotic. It's a world that is still looking down an abyss of economic just destruction as we continue to go forward. But there will be opportunities and there will be changes that we can navigate. And who better to navigate those changes with us than the lovely Gary Burt and Aid McCormack. Gary, how the devil are you? Fantastic to have you back with us.
Yeah, sobering up after Christmas. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, good man. And Aid, always a pleasure.
Delighted to be here again.
Now, I know it may look like we're wearing exactly the same clothes since we last spoke to you, 2 weeks ago, but I would like to tell you that these are an entirely different set of the same clothes that we were wearing before. So it's not like that we've just done a live stream and then gone straight into a pre-record or anything like that. Perish the thought. And clearly, Aid and Gary in different positions. So if this wasn't a different opportunity, how would that work, huh? Yeah, right, fine. All right. Look, I'll stop messing around now. Let's go to predictions. And Gary, you're always good for a laugh when it comes to predicting what's going to happen. You're mostly right. I still remember you being incredibly right about education for the last 10 flipping years. Throw me some predictions for 2021.
We're setting ourselves up for massive embarrassment here, aren't we? Only a full prediction.
Why would today be any different to any other day?
So let's go with the things we know, build out from those. So 2021, it's gonna be a tough year. So furlough, thankfully, well done Rishi and well done the government. I'm going to criticize them in a minute. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to storm them. But well done in providing the funding to keep businesses going and people's roofs over their head. That was good. But 2021 is going to be a tough year. We've got clearly COVID. We've got the end of furlough. We've got Brexit, and I'm not going to go on to that about a political point. But we have a very uncertain economic climate going forward. So the first thing is we're going to see a lot of uncertainty. We're going to see a lot of instability in business. Now, I think, what am I hoping we're going to see? So I'm hoping we're going to see a really big, bold plan from government, because the only way we're going to get out of the situation we're in is with bloody big ballsy thinking and big pocketed investment to enable the UK to accelerate out of this. If we go into this, tighten our belts and think that we can slowly climb out of this, we're not. We're going to go into a much deeper hole. So, I'm sure we've got government ministers listening, but if there's one thing that needs to go top of the plan for a prediction that we need, and we might look back and go, it didn't happen, in which case, we were right, but the government didn't listen. But the key thing is we need to see much more boldness in terms of the macro climate that we're creating for businesses to be in. We've seen it supported for the last year, which is great. What we need to see for 2021 is enabled. We need to see a business climate that puts entrepreneurism at the top, that says small businesses, we're going to give you, rocket boosters to help you get going. Big business, look, we're not going to come down on you, but we need to see a greater level of responsibility in the way that you're working with your supply chains, the way that you're working with your employees. So, my prediction is I think we're going to see much more bold thinking. Now, and the sad thing is it's going to be for the wrong reasons. But that's my prediction is we're going to see some big, bold changes from government to help give us a climate that's going to help us to be productive and accelerate out of this.
I like that, Gary. So essentially what you're calling for, or you're calling that we'll see, is, if you like, a second and third wave of economic distress hopefully supported by some bold government thinking. Aid, how about you? What's the big play that you can see for 2021?
Well, I think, focusing on, as Gary has, on the government, I think the sad fact is that the government leaders are incompetent, and that's not a reflection of their IQ. It's a reflection of the shortness of time that they're generally in position and how long it takes to become competent and to be effective. And of course, they're operating in an unprecedented environment. So I can't imagine them being in any way strategic. Job number one is not economic; it's to avoid civil unrest. So throwing money at the problem, furlough schemes, and so on, certainly kind of help dampen that down. But we will increasingly be facing increased reckoning as, let's say, the middle class starts to lose interest in propping up society. So, the technology's coming along, and COVID didn't necessarily accelerate it, but it's given organizations a very good reason to accelerate their technology plans. So it's not a case of humans versus technology, it's a case of humans and technology, but the humans have to be able to do stuff that the technology cannot do, which means bringing your brain to work and actually engaging it. And that's a thought too far for many people who are essentially process workers, even though they might be very well paid process workers. So I'm predicting a fairly high level of civil dissatisfaction and a revisiting of the social contract in some capacity.
Yeah, that's interesting, Ed. Now, you've talked about this before, or maybe you haven't. I'm just paraphrasing it. But this is sort of this difference between this industrial age of working and management and this digital age. And it's your point about, we can no longer be the process machines for work, because that's, Gary, presumably where your robotic process automation will come in. But it is going to be, it's now about, what's inside here and how do we leverage the stuff that only you can do that the machines can't. I think that's going to be a really interesting, and that's not a challenge, it's going to be an interesting transition for a lot of organizations, isn't it? Where they're really, thinking about their competition. And maybe, have we always said this, though, that, the true part of digital transformation is not the product and service, but the experience that you deliver around it? Do you think this is now where that experience becomes more important?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have the best channels to market and the sexiest interfaces and so on, but if there's no innovation coming out of the organization, people will go elsewhere. So in essence, what it boils down to, in my view, is that how you treat your employees is more important than how you treat your customers, because if you get the best talent, you will develop the best services and you will attract the best people in the market. So I think that's kind of misplaced and misunderstood. And you can tell because of the lack of HR directors in the senior executive team. But having said that, a lot of the senior HR people are, if you like, cog managers as opposed to cognitive leaders.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's going to be the dynamic. I'm quite interested in how it's going to play out, and it's not really a nice dynamic, but there's this dynamic between the organizations who are trying to pivot, is an overused word, but change and transform and all that sort of stuff. And there's the dynamic that is still the sort of the aftermath, the great reckoning. Richard Tyler talks about this, which is more about the sort of the mental health reckoning that we will deal with in the aftermath of all of this. But I think there's going to be a great economic reckoning where organizations that may have lasted out, 12 months of the pandemic may not last the first few months of the recovery, because they're frankly, hanging on by the skin of their teeth. And so you've got these two worlds, this sort of dynamic and changing and hopefully growing world, and then this sort of slowly decaying old world, and how those two match up in terms of skills. I mean, that's going to be quite an interesting play. And that's why I thought it was really curious that you would pick out that actually the employees become more important than the customers. Gary, where are you on that?
I agree with Aid. I think a couple of dynamics that are worth mentioning. And we're going to see a greater inequality and disparity of workers. So, because what we've seen forces which can be equally good, can be equally bad for another group of people. So the fact that I can now go and work remotely, essentially for any organization globally, expands the amount of organizations I can work for. But it also means the competition I'm facing is global as well. So there's a dynamic there. But also, I'm in a field and I have a background and I have a set of skills, a very special set of skills that mean that I can do this. Now, a lot of people are not in jobs where they can do that. They can't, work remotely full time. And what we're going to see, and it's not new, it's been there for a while, but I think we're going to see this amplify in the coming year. Is we're going to see this disparity between those who are able to to leverage the benefits of that being globally connected, being able to work remotely, being able to be highly productive as an individual, and those who are dependent on organizations. And if we're not careful, we're going to see an increasing disparity of the first group see the world get much better, and the second group see the world get much worse. And picking up on the point of automation, there's a really key dynamic here. When we first started to see automation, it was far too often used to eliminate human roles. It was used to engineer people out of work. That's not where the smart companies are today. Smart companies are recognizing the value of humans, and automation becomes a tool to increase productivity. It's not there to get rid of the people. It's there to help them become more and more productive, to deliver things better, to be able to accelerate things, to be able to become more autonomous. So I think automation will absolutely be a core asset this year, but it's how it's used that's going to be the critical difference. It is not going to be used to get rid of call center people, because service is going to become essential. It's going to be used to make those interactions better and more efficient.
No, I like that. And it reminds me, I did a gig in Ireland once for Microsoft, actually, but after I'd left. And I was on a panel with guys from the finance industry. There's a finance director from a bank, right? And he had this really, really lovely line, which I thought was really wonderful, because it kind of encapsulated what you talked about. He says, you guys have got this all wrong if you think that this is about robots, doing away with the humans. If we get this right, this is about taking the robot out of the human. And I just thought, oh, what a lovely way of thinking about it, because that when you're in that space and you're trying to sort of articulate, that really is what it's about, isn't it? It's trying to free up. And, Aid, you talked about the difference between the cog manager and the cognitive manager. That's kind of what we're looking for, isn't it? People who are able to deal with that sort of rich and slightly chaotic sort of human skill that is going to be so crucial for us. And maybe that's the big transition for 2021, right? Is this, we've talked about it a number of times with you guys on this show, where we've talked about the transition from management to leadership being so crucial to where we go. So away from the command and control and much more into the empowerment and the coaching side of things. And Gary, I mean, I know coaching is high up on your agenda as well, isn't it, in terms of leadership skills, not just in the world of work. I know it's also the stuff that you do around judo as well, which I love. So is coaching going to be one of the key skills, do we think, of 2021?
I think, so coaching is one tool. I think what is going to become a massive focus area, and this is a really positive thing, is people. Organizations are going to start caring more. I mean, we've seen this. What we've seen, the best organizations have really evolved, and I work for a company I'm really proud of, Blue Prism, and not to name check them, but to recognize positive shifts in terms of how they're reaching out to people, how recognizing that, and we're seeing this in communications, not top down. This isn't that big, this is the future, but in trying to have a dialogue with people across the company and going, these times are tough. Please recognize that some of your colleagues are going to be finding it harder than others. So be supportive. Don't jump on them if they're not on a call. Their kid might be ill. So I think this is a really positive evolution of the way that we're viewing the relationship. And it's not a traditional Japanese model of ownership of the employee, of a very top-down one. It's not American one of directive. It's actually a really positive, almost Scandinavian view of this being it needs both parties to work. And we can see changes on both sides that, if done well, give a really positive outcome. So what I think, we want to predictions. I think we're going to see wellness go right up the agenda. Yeah. We're going to see organizations starting to care a lot more, and not care in the sense of bland HR, nameless programs and access to online training.
Corporate compassion.
that real? How do we start to really see that people are well? And what can we do to help them? And we're going to see more innovation around that. How can we start to have those safety mechanisms in place? So when we do have people remote or with life challenges, that we can help them and empower them. And that doesn't mean help them, give them some pseudo HR discipline that's not really helping. It's designed to push you out. But actually support to say, we hired you, we've invested in you. If things get tough, how do we help you get through this and put systems in place that work with you? So I think that's going to be a really positive outcome for this year, that relationship will hopefully transform into a positive place.
And I wonder, Aid, if that plays into your point about sort of how important the employees being, because I suspect people will be wanting to choose employers that are taking that approach and have that mindset. And let me answer the question. I'll get you to answer the question in a second, but I want to just pick up on another thing that you were saying, Gary, which was, one of the things that I've seen across all of a sort of a very diverse set of clients and organizations that I work with is this leveling of both the employees looking after each other and the management trying to look after the employees. So it's really, really interesting to see how that comes together. And the ones that have done well, and pretty much a lot of the ones that I work with, even though they're going through some really trying times, that sense of just being together. I mean, you know that I'm very close to hospitality, and so seeing them be decimated in the way that they have been, but then watching the employees come together to try and figure out what do they do, how they're going to stay together, what they're going to do to sort of move forward despite some really, really difficult times. And I say that as we all go back into tier 3. It's been really heartening, and I think part of this is this sort of social capital, and it's a horrible way of thinking about it, but we can't let that go. And my fear is, I guess, that long after this we'll think, well, why do we need to do this? But let me come back, Aid. Let me wind back a bit there and go back to this sort of whole concept about sort of employees sort of coming together in this sense of empowerment. How do we help organizations do this in a way that A is not sort of trite, but B, do it in a way that's sustainable and can be carried forward?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit like, you can talk about sustainability, you can talk about diversity, you can talk about wellness as if they're subjects in their own right and are worthy of consideration beyond the economic. But they can all be seen in economic terms. Wellness at the end of the day is just cognitive reclamation. So if I've got less to worry about, I've actually got more brain power to do good stuff for the organization. So it makes good business sense to nurture your people. And I sometimes talk about creating a cognitive Disneyland where I'm really excited about going there during the day. I leave exhausted at the end of the day, but I'm really looking forward to going back the next day. So it's cultivating that kind of cognitive gymnasium. You might even call it, cognitive gymnasium. So the relationship between the employer and the employee is less of boss and servant. It's more coach and athlete. So what you get then is greater trust, greater intimacy in the best sense. And coming back to the earlier points, is we're social, we're tribal in nature. This caring for each other is actually how we're wired. So anything that encourages that kind of looking after your team, as it were, will actually take us to the next level in terms of cognitive capacity.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
I think, one of the things about lockdown is we get an opportunity sometimes to start to look at areas we didn't traditionally. We can pick up different books. I think one of the analogies that I see, I keep coming back to, and it's because it's happening in one industry, the military, but I think it's relevant to a lot of other organizations in terms of how they're doing it, is this evolution from an infantry model to a special forces model, to instead of saying we want a lot of people and we want to make them homogenous entities that we can control, we have a very different model. We want to have a smaller number of people, which, but we're going to look after those in a very different way. We're going to train them much higher. We're going to make them multidisciplinary. We're going to embed flexibility. We're going to train them for autonomy and decision making. Now, we still want them to, if they're pointed over there, to walk over there, but we're going to give them more flexibility in how they do that. We're going to give them more resources. So I think those shifts to what we would have called a knowledge worker, but those shifts to much more autonomous, higher trust working is going to be a real change. And I don't think this is just in the IT field, and certainly not just in the knowledge worker field. I think we're going to see this evolve to a lot of other areas because it's the only sustainable model. The infantry model does a job, but it's massively inefficient. You can't have agility. And one of the things we know is we need agility. So if we want to have agility, how are we going to do that? It has to be empowerment. It has to be trust. If you want those, you have to provide a caring environment that people feel safe in, which means you have to look after them. So we start to see a whole lot of changes that are they're not disparate changes. They're all interconnected. If you want to have an organization that's going to be survivable, it has to be adaptable. That needs you to build an organization that's designed to flex. And you need to make those changes to be able to do that. And so, it means, looking at who you're hiring, the skills and the qualities, they're going to change. So when you go into an interview, I think, a personal level, when you go into an interview, don't focus on trying to fit into a mold, focus on being yourself. Because in a highly distributed world, that's what's going to get you hired. Not trying to be who you think they want you to be, but being you and seeing if that resonates, because if it doesn't, that wasn't the right place for you. And I think that's hopefully a really positive shift that we'll start to see much, much more of. And it's enabled because we have a much bigger pool that we can look for people in. So I don't need to, where I am, if I want to collaborate with people, I could collaborate with people anywhere within a few time zones. But I can spend the time finding that right person who's a great fit. I don't have to be limited to someone within 5 miles who commute to an office down the road so we can work together. So I think there are some much, much bigger underlying shifts that we're going to see as we go forward from where we are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to just switch gears. I'm just keeping an eye on the time as well. I want to talk technology predictions. That's the one I'd be, especially with you guys in particular, be interested. And I would say 2020 was the year of the video call, right? It was a coming of age of the video call. And one of the things I noticed, I don't know if you guys noticed this, in the second lockdown in the UK, was I started to see people be a lot more innovative with their live streams and their video calls, rather than taking an event and let's have a webinar or we'll live stream it. They started to think about audience engagement and all that sort of stuff. So my prediction just to get us started for 2021 is that, yes, of course, the hybrid, blah blah blah, we love seeing you in person and we'll do stuff digitally. I get that, yeah, fine. But I think we're going to start to see a really beautiful evolution of really engaging, well thought out virtual connections and virtual events, both in the world of work and beyond the world of work. So that's my technology prediction for 2021. Aid, Gary, I don't know who wants to go first. I don't know if you've got any ready to go. Let's go, Aid.
Okay, so go on, Aid, you go first.
No, it's very difficult to predict, but I think when I consider lots of different factors, not least cancel culture and so on, it means that provenance and so on and the source of things is going to become increasingly important, which I think is going to give blockchain a nice little push.
Interesting. Do you know, in 34 shows, I think that's the first time someone has said blockchain. I'm gonna write to Norris McWhirter. I think that's a world record.
Sorry.
No, that's good, because I mean, not only did you mention it, it was actually contextual. You weren't like, yes, we're going to do stuff with AI and blockchain. Yes, we're going to deliver milk with AI and blockchain, and we're also going to sell widgets with AI and blockchain. So no, you're perfectly welcome to mention it. I just thought it was ironic that we haven't, but you're right, because it is going to start to push that federated nature. And I wonder if that ties back to the conversation we were having 2 weeks ago about this sort of new world for entrepreneurs, where they're going to be able to take advantage of maybe some agility that they have that the large organizations don't, but they're going to need the kind of network. And Gary, you were talking about this, the logistics to back that up. It's no good being, you know, this lovely little artisan seller of stuff if you can't compete with the kind of logistical scale of Amazon. And I wonder if blockchain plays into that as well. So sorry, I took us down a complete rat hole just because you said blockchain, but that's what I'm here to do.
I've got. I'm thinking of a word now that I can get a bingo hit on. So I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip it. So taking your video calls, I think couple of big shifts around video. First of all, the quality. So you are operating from your house. This is what a year ago, it's production quality. It's broadcast quality from your house. I mean, and whilst you spent a few quid on this, you haven't had to remortgage like you would have done not that long ago to have production quality output. So, you know, technology shifts, a couple, and then shifts that are not technology. So the first thing is, I think we're going to see the quality of output increase. So the idea that and this is changing as actually we can buy decent webcams and video cameras again. Yeah. We're going to see less tolerance of rubbishy calls, rubbishy mics, and dropouts. I think there will be a push of get yourself sorted. If you're working remotely, buy a decent video camera, or 80 quid or whatever, even 40 quid. Don't operate on the rubbish inside the laptop.
I'm going to have to butt in before you go there, because this is a massive rant, and I'm aiming this at all of the business leaders, the people that I would have sat shoulder to shoulder with in airport lounges and all that, who would think nothing of spending 400 quid on some bloody pen in the in-flight magazine, but won't spend 10 quid on a bloody cable that connects to their router so that they can have decent, network connectivity. Sort it out. Right, Gary, your option number 2.
We're ranting now. Okay, so big changes. Conscious of time, I don't want to be cut off. So big changes. We're going to see a shift towards much more creativity and innovation in video and audio. And I think the good thing there is this is going to enable a very different way of communication. I think we're seeing it already with the explosion of podcasts, which is brilliant because I love them. But I think we're going to see this go back into the organizations as we start to see not the death of PowerPoint, but the evolution of the narrative. As in order to engage again, no one's going to watch your PowerPoint show for an hour on a webcast. I don't want to see you flip through. The challenge becomes, how can you engage me through engaging content? You want me to watch you, put the work into making it engaging. So we if your PowerPoint slides were crap, I'd switch off. Well, so the PowerPoint slides got better. It needs to evolve again. How are you going to make that content engaging, human, and a story? So, key skills, sort your video, sort your audio, but also if you haven't already done it, start reading about storytelling as well. Yeah. Biggest single skill. If you're going to focus on one skill that's going to accelerate your career through the roof this year, next year, we're not quite there yet. What skill? Storytelling. Learn how to communicate your story and have people care. And so no excuses for not having decent video.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny on the storytelling. I don't think I've had this conversation on this show, but I remember having a conversation with John a few weeks ago. We were walking the dogs, and he's like, "Dad, seriously, what is the point of English? I don't get it." And I'm like, look, it's a bit like this. To an extent, there isn't a point. But the other side of it is everything you do is about how you tell the story of what you're doing. And if you can be really good at telling those stories, that's when the world of work kind of opens up and there's an opportunity there. And I actually think it's true in whatever world of work that you're in and whatever level you're in the world of work. If you can tell a good story about it, if you can get people to engage with the message of it, that's when the magic happens. He still didn't buy into me telling him that, so I've still got some work to do to convert him. But I do think your point, and it's funny because I'd asked you about technical predictions, but I think part of it, and maybe this is part of the point, Gary, is this sort of the technical proficiency, because the things are affordable. It is affordable to get a semi-decent camera and a little bit of a light, and then start to think, well, how could I curate that? The tools that are available today, and even the tools that are available for free, I find astounding in terms of what you can do if you're confident with the technology. We did some stuff for schools a few weeks ago. We did a showcase on creativity, and I think the opportunity is out there now for parents and for teachers to start to inspire kids, and not the nerdy kids, not just them, because they get it anyway, but show the people. And this is where, you know, we're sort of pre-recording this. Jazz would be coming in talking about the stuff that they've always done, which opens up sort of the eyes and minds, which is about teaching them creativity, storytelling, but giving them the canvas of technology as their brush. Ada, I could see you sort of wanting to come in a couple of times there. I'll just sort of maybe pause for breath.
No, I'm still processing the storytelling piece. I think that's absolutely spot on. It plays to our natural social behaviour. It makes things cognitively more interesting. And you know, if you're looking to instill a quality in the next generation, the ability to influence has got to be right up there. So yeah, it could be the year of the story or the
I like
narrative.
that. You've just said something massively important, and not that everything you say isn't massively important, Aid, but this thing about equality. I think that's going to be a theme for me for 2021. And then when I'm talking about equality, so I've been doing a lot, as you know, we talk about digital skills and we talk about the digital divide. You know, I'm convinced we've got some work to do. And actually, probably the three of us, I think there's some specific things I'd love us to explore, because I think we can't allow the digital divide to exist, and be it simply because people aren't able to connect, or, you know, the point that you were just making, Aid, about those that can tell stories are going to do better than those that can't. And I don't think we can allow that to happen. So I'm hoping that 2021, my prediction is, let's make it a year of digital equality. So that's a good place for me to leave it. Any final closing thoughts for you guys about the things, the predictions that you'd like to see in 2021?
Gary?
So digitally, yeah. I was thinking, like, what do I want to see? I want to see some of the tech leaders show some bloody leadership and show some bloody responsibility. And I swore there for a reason. Stop harvesting my life for your benefit. There's a balance to be had here. This word again. You've been taking this too far. Yeah. I don't want to, every website I go to, I don't want to have to fight and have to go into confirm my choices that you do not harvest every piece of data. So stop doing it. And to be honest, if we don't see some more responsible leadership from the tech companies, I hope government really comes down and starts to wrap them a lot harder than they are at the moment. So tech companies, show some balls, show some leadership, and actually show some civic responsibility for having a business model that is much more balanced and not sustainable. That's a bit off topic. I don't know. Is that off topic? It's like,
No. I think that's bang on. Do you know what, Gary? I think it's part of the same deal, right, that we're talking about. It's not that these things are in themselves wrong. I think it's the fact that the balance is off kilter. I think people understand that there are economics of how these services have to work, but it feels a bit one-sided. And if we are going to have a world where technology creates an equal opportunity for everybody, I think that's part of the deal. I think we have to have platforms that are built to grow and add value, and that value has to go both ways. So I think that's bang on. Aid, final word from you.
Yeah, just building on what Gary said there, is that, you know, the technology companies are extremely important to business and society. They're the interface between the technology and the value realization by the consumers, by the citizens, and so on. And so they should take that responsibility seriously. And we're going down this kind of platform road, and who owns the ecosystem. I think that's quite dangerous, because it's a kind of winner takes all model that we're heading towards. So I do think it does need to be measured, and smart technology companies will start to exhibit reversing from this trend in order to be perceived in a better light. We don't normally well, we do have very strong brand associations with consumer technology companies, but I think the enterprise technology companies need to get their act together in this respect as well.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I think you're absolutely right on that. How that will come together. So I'm very conscious of time, and I've kept you guys for a very long time. I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you again, not just for your time now, but for being with us on this entire journey. You were talking earlier, Gary, about video quality, and if you go back to shows 1 through probably 5, when we were cobbling things together on what we had lying around. And I want you to come back and then look at what we've got now. And you guys are coming in glorious Technicolor at 30 frames per second in HD. That's amazing. Do you know what I mean? And the thing is, long-winded way of me saying thank you for being supportive with your time and just your energy throughout the year and helping us build this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Aidan McCormack and Gary Burt. I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Dave.
And brilliantly, I cut them off. Right, you've had your thanks. You can sod off. But no, thank you to them. They've been amazing. And thank you to all of you. You've been amazing. You've been on this journey with us for 9 months. We're going to continue into 2021. We don't know where things are going to play. We don't care. We're having too much fun. It's been wonderful that you take the time to join us. We love your feedback. We know the drill. We love to get your subscription. Tell your mates about it. What we do here is nothing short of magic every single week. We'd love to see you. We're going to see you right bright and early in 2021. Thanks for being with us in 2020. We made it, guys. It's behind us now. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon.
There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioners' future. This is just one of them.